Us everyone. Thank you for watching the Kyokushin Shuffle, and I hope everyone's well. As always, a special guest and a friend as such from the ditch, as they say, and you know, he's been across the map from me at times because I've competed against his students, and I'm looking forward to discussing a couple of those moments as well. But everyone, Shihan, Mike Kenworthy from Wellington in New Zealand. Shihan, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I look forward to the little chat we're going to have.
Yeah, sensational. Shihan, I contacted you and you straight away said it'd be great to have a chat. So thank you again. And, you know, how's it going there in NZ and how are you?
Yes, it's a bit slow at the moment with the COVID thing going, and we've been through our real tight lockdown levels. We're now back to level 1 here in parts of New Zealand. So dojo's operating full time again now. Okay. Students are coming in, so we're back to full swing. Just trying to relieve a bit of tension from everything that's been going on, you know. Yeah. But we're getting there.
Oh, that's good. That's good to hear, you know, and that's the upside, that everyone will start to, you know, feel some normality with what's happened in our lives. Shihan, you know, I just had a brief chat with you, but you currently, and I want to go on an angle with you here with your career, just to let people know what you've been doing with your career in your professional capacity before we deep dive into karate, because it'll answer some other questions as well.
Yep. I've been in the role of what they call over here RDO, Rugby Development Officer. So for the last 16 years, it's about coach education, player development, and talent IDing. So working in schools and clubs. So one of my roles as a coach educator is to every rugby coach in New Zealand has to be a qualified coach to be able to coach. So my role is to run those courses, qualify the coaches, and make sure they're all up to speed with the safety procedures we have and correct and safe technique like tackle and the clean outs and all those sorts of things. Working to schools, primary schools, going to all the schools, secondary schools, and promote rugby. Is one of our roles, and run little tournaments, going to primary schools to set up tournaments for the schools to run, help the coaches, educate the coaches. So it's a really interesting role and really satisfying when you see players I've taken out of school now playing professional rugby in France and Italy and doing things that they would never have done without the push and the achieving. And in Wellington, I've been in Wellington for the last 10 years doing it, and I've been placed out in Wainui-a-Mata, which is a low socioeconomic area, mainly islanders and Maori out there. So educating them on their nutrition and eating, you know, we have a season, we finish the season, they go away, come back for start pre-season 20 kilos heavier than they were when they left the season. So really interesting times, you know, and they're great people to work with. But that's been my role. And then unfortunately, due to COVID, the funding and everything for these sorts of roles is taken a real big hit. So we've sort of lost our roles at the moment. So, and rugby started late, and it's all running late. And if you know anything about rugby, you'll see all the controversy over the Better Slow Cups that's going to be happening in the next week and the stuff like that. But no, a very interesting role. And the great thing about it, there's a good crossover between coaching rugby and martial arts. And I'll just tell you one story while I'm here.
Please.
The first advanced rugby coaching course we held with the Hurricanes area, Mike Cron, the All Black coach, All Black scrum coach, he was part of one of the tutors I'd organised, and he had just come back from Japan, and he brought all this knowledge back from the sumos, from martial arts, and everything that he picked up on a 2-month tour around all those sorts of things at Japan, and brought it back and introduced different techniques to do. So there's a huge crossover over there, and I found that really interesting. And we had a good chat because when he found out I was a martial artist, away we went.
Yeah, of course.
And I've been lucky enough that in my role, I've done pre-season work with the Hurricanes. So I don't know whether you know the Hurricanes is a
Yes. Yep.
stupid
Yep.
franchise.
Come across
So
it.
every pre-season we come and do a martial arts session, you know, and I
Unreal.
remember the very first time in there, this was in 2004, I took the first session with the Hurricanes, and we walk in there, and Tito, this big red-headed guy, the bully of rugby back then, who's this bloody wanker martial artist coming, you know? And then one of the coaches says, well, I don't want any of my players getting hurt, because they'd done a judo session and a couple of the boys got carried away. But I said, no, this is about punching and kicking and running and all this. And so I got Tito out to hold the pad, you know, to demonstrate how to punch, because they normally just do little pitter-patters. And I said, no, we want show everything. And so I had him there, and I let rip as hard as I could. And I winded him, you know. And he's going, you know, and all the boys, So you have to earn a bit of respect from these guys sometimes, you know. It's just interesting times how martial artists got looked at back then, but I think it's a different story now.
No, that's good. Thank you for building that play, because I knew about it. I know about it, and but I wanted the listeners to get a grasp of that, because let's deep dive now, and I'm sure we'll rehash, you know, where that holds as well into the next hour. So I break the ice always. Martial arts, you know, 40 odd years in it. How did it start? Where did it start? And why were you so, you know, into it?
Well, it's a long story. You know, my main sports when I left school was rugby and surf lifesaving. So I represented Wanganui in rugby in the rep team, and won national titles at the surf club. But I always had this passion for martial arts, but never had the time. And when I was flatting, one of my flatmates did some martial arts. Look, I can't even remember what it was, but we used to train at home and do all this and that. Then in 1980, we got married and moved to Sydney, Australia, and bought a coffee shop in Sydney, in Chatswood, and part of a little arcade, and next door was the butcher shop, and one of the butchers was a Kiwi guy who did Kyokushin karate, and I'm going, wow, that's great, because I didn't have time to play rugby, because coffee shop, we worked late on a Thursday night and all day Saturday, so rugby was out of the question. So he said, look, Willoughby's just up round the corner, the dojo's up there. And one of my mates, we had been looking around at different styles, and then when he said this Kyokushin, it's full contact and all that, so we went up there, Howard Lippman's dojo in Willoughby.
Unreal. And
so we walked in there and did the training session. Of course, the end of the session's end was always kumite, you know, and I'm thinking, here I'm a young 25-year-old, you know, rugby in our day, you get a punch on the nose or a copper elbow or something. So kumite come, and I was getting stuck in, because I got a hidey, didn't I? Mick Majewski, all these old school guys there, the toughest nails. And afterwards, I had to talk to them, and they said, if you want to learn, you know, the harder you go, the harder we'll go. If you want to learn, we'll teach you. But if you want to try and beat us, we'll beat you. And then I'm going, wow, okay. And that got me hooked there and then. The passion and the hardness of the training and the style, because I used to hard training. I thought, shit, this is, I love this. And that was the start of my journey. From then, I never missed a night, you know. And that's how it all started, and just built from there, you know.
So you moved to Sydney. You've just married. You, as I say to others, you got a taste of this full contact Japanese style, you know, that's starting to blossom into, you know, the strongest karate in the world. And, you know, I allude to some people, some you know, like you said, you trained every night. It was, you know, obviously your background there in staying fit and healthy and strong was a key part of it. but then there had to have been something. Was the black belt something for you? Was it seeing these other strong like men as such, you know, dominating, and you going, well, how do I achieve this? What was that next tier for you that made you, you know, seek that goal?
Well, you're seeing the ability and the strength of the training sessions, and then what they had achieved, what they could do, and then coming in just after I'd started, not long after I started, Mamoru Kaneko come to our dojo, Japanese instructor, one of the Uchi Deschi of Masayamas and all that. He come in and was a full-time instructor there with us.
Wow.
And whoa, looking at this guy, I'm thinking, mate. Then he said to people, he's going to do extra sessions, come to a session on the weekend, extra sessions. So there must have been about 15 of us turn up. You know, wow, what a session. 1,000 techniques of this, 1,000 techniques of that, 1,000 of this, 1,000 of that. The next session, 5 people turned up. So we go again. And on the third session, I was the only one turned up.
Oh, wow.
And in that session, created a really close relationship with Kaneko.
Good one.
And that built the relationship I had with him for 5 or 6 years, training with him, and his attitude, his approach, his never give up. And then there's lots of stories I can say about the different training methods he used with me and stuff like that. But you know, he just, when you saw the things he could do and stuff, I'm thinking, hell, you know, I want to be like that.
Yeah.
And he was the same age, I think, then, but you know, he'd left school, never worked, went straight in as an Uchi Deschi, got sent over to Australia, toured around, did some time at Shihan Taylor's with Jimmy as well, with Shihan Jimmy. And then Howard took him on, and he just worked. He never worked. He just full-time instructor with Howard. So, yeah.
So you know, again, you could share many stories, but if I was to ask you specifically the thing that he helped you with in your, I guess, development, obviously, or was it something within internal, you know, internal meaning your spirit across that never give up, like you just said? What was the 1 or 2 key things that you, off the top of your head?
The things that got me most was we concentrated on one technique, and that was Gina Mawashigiri. That was my strong technique. So he'd put me in front of the mirror, and I'd do 100 off this leg into the mirror.
Right.
And he'd put the jandal down, that's 100. Then the other leg, 100, the jandal this way. So he had 10 jandals. Jeez. And until we go to 5 out this way, 5 out that way, you know. Yeah. And we did that nearly, I'd say 3 or 4 times a week for 3 months. Then he said, right, let's move on to the bag. So as soon as I got on the bag, mate, I just wanted to smash that bag. As soon as I started going full on, then he'd say, whoa, yame, back to the mirror. Because the technique went out the window going on the bag, because all I wanted to do was power. So then it just taught me perseverance, get the technique right, do all this. And the other thing that got me was the mental. He put me nose against the wall, having to stand in Sensei Dachi. Toes had to be white, your nails had to be white, and shut your eyes, and everything you'd hit, you tense. But had to stay like that for at least 30 minutes. Just tensed up, and just not 30 to start with, but to start with. But the build up, by the end, it was for 30 minutes just. Because you just had to zone in and do things like, and the other thing was, for 5 years, when it got closer to tournament times and we'd train, at 5 o'clock in the morning, be knocking on my bedroom window, say, come up. So we'd train every morning for an hour, Monday to Friday, and then every night in the dojo. And I was married then. I was panel beating by then. I'd sold the coffee shop because it didn't didn't work, and my trade was a panel beater, and then, but I must say the lucky thing for me was that my wife, in the dojo there were a lot of women then, and she was a aerobics instructor, and then got into karate, and she loved it just as much. So I was lucky enough she could understand my passion and allowed me to do these things, you know.
Well, that's a great story. That's very cool. That because it reiterates again what we're about to move forward with is, you know, you've built now your foundation with a strong teacher, Howard Littman, Kaneko, Sensei, and then I'm at fault with it as well. You know, you just don't want to let your teacher down, do you? You know,
no. Yeah, they put all that time into you, and I think it's you know, when you see the Japanese mentality of never give up, you know, you never let yourself down in front of your instructor. I remember, just off a little bit, seeing that was at the Fourth World Tournament that I was at, competed in Masuda.
Yes.
He got carried to the mat for fight off for third place. He got carried to the mat because he was so battered and injured, and then he walked on and started fighting like he hadn't had a. And to me, I was standing there, go, whoa, this is just how strong your mind is over your body, the mental toughness, and that now doing my coaching in rugby, and the All Blacks and everything we do now, it's the top two is the strongest part. You should be training more than your physical. Your mind is so much stronger than your body.
Understood.
And to see that with the Japanese back then, they already had that, you know. It's taken us a while to, as coaches or coach educators, to be able to bring that into our players about mental toughness.
Great point. Because, you know, great point, because I've raised it in past with my experience with basketball, and then moving into karate. I had it, and the coaches loved that side of it. However, I wasn't 6'3", I was 5'10", and there were certain things that missed, but then there was the heart and the endeavor and the fortitude. And then when I transitioned to Kyokushin, and then I had a great coach like Shihan Billy, who just let me channel my energy towards what it needed to be. And then there was a structure with that. My mental approach was a no-brainer. Like it was ticked. So it was like, oh, great, you've got that. And now, you know, you can see what you add on from there. So for you, you know, seeing something like that back then in the 80s, especially, like, you know, a occasion like the Worlds, you know, that's the mecca of, you know, karate as such. So, you know, you've just alluded to the Worlds, but you succeeded in some of your, you know, competitions in Australia when you were living here, or living in Oz, and then which then got you to represent Australia.
A bit of 87. I won the middleweight title at Sydney Opera House, Sydney Town Hall, and from that tournament, the team was picked to go to the World Tournament. And as an interesting fact, in '86 in Geelong, I got through to the semi-finals, and I had to fight Peter Collis. Peter Collis was the man to be feared back then, you know, and this is when the mental toughness come in. I went out there and I fought him, and I was beaten mentally by him straight away. I got off the mat and think, mate, he didn't even hurt me. Well, that's how I felt. He probably did, but you know what I mean. I was scared enough mentally. 87, I got him again in the semi-final.
Right.
And I beat him.
Wow.
Gidam Mawashigiri. Most of my winning technique was from that Gidam Mawashigiri. And got through to the final and won the final. But in the process, he broke 3 of my ribs in the semi-final.
Oh, shit.
But come to the final, by then, you know, the mental tough, I haven't come this far to lose now, you know, and banged it out, got there, and then afterwards, when my wife come give me a hug, whoa, what the hell, you know? But that was, yeah, and that got us in the team to go there, which was a huge experience. And I got through to the third round, and my third round fight was with Masuda.
Oh, great.
Yeah. And I created a good relationship with him afterwards, because he didn't knock me out, but decision went his way, as you hard to beat the Japanese without knocking them down back in those days. But talking to him afterwards and then hearing his training plan to mine, he didn't work.
Fascinating.
He didn't work. They trained 8 hours a day for days, you know, and all that. And I'm thinking, I had just had my first daughter born in 1985. She's 2 years old, and I left them to go to this world tournament and train in the morning. I was running a job as a bouncer as well, because my wife hadn't had a job because she was had the baby. So kids, panel beating, training, working on a door in a nightclub in Sydney 3 nights a week, bloody. Wow. But the things you do,
of course,
and you try to tell young people today,
the
sacrifices you make, and they just want it to happen straight away.
Wow.
That world tournament, and I remember walking into the hotel and seeing Andy Hug sitting there in a shirt, muscles bulging out everywhere and doing this, and then seeing him fight, you know, his way through, and these guys going, whoa, you know, it was just so interesting to see, you know, come back from the hotel, have your ice bath, because you've got to fight the next day and carry on. Interesting. But for me, lucky enough, that trip, Kaneko got me in as a Uchi Deschi with Keiji Senpai.
Oh, wow.
All-time, he was runner-up for the second and third world tournaments, and All Japan champion.
Sato,
So, because Kaneko, he trained with Kaneko and that, so he had the contact. So after that tournament, I got to go to their place, live with his Uchi Deschi, and then train there. And that's another experience that was just unbelievable. I could tell a little story.
Go for it, please. The floor is yours.
So we got there, and the dojo's under his house. His house is built up. It was on a hill, so the dojo's underneath. The Uchi Deschi room was 3 bunks, had a hole in the floor with the cooker burner, and the kitchen next door with a big sack of rice like this, and the shower. And the first session, the night before the first session that I was supposed to start, Shihan Shishinoe got married that year. He was on his honeymoon, and he had come in and called in, and we all went out for dinner. And mate, whiskies, well, and you're not allowed to pour your own, you can't pie, going like this. And, you know, and then we had to get up next morning for the first 2-hour session, and I'm going to Kaneko, I don't think I can do this. And he comes out with the shinai, you know, and we were doing the rounds, and he's just banging us. And I remember going into the shower with his Uchi Deschi, I can't remember his name, and he had like a birthmark on his cheek and thigh on one leg, and he could speak a little bit of English, and we talked to said a birthmark. He go, no, bruising from shinai. I'm going, oh no,
this is going to be great.
What am I in for? That was a really interesting time, because Senpai had 3 dojos, so in the teaching the classes at night, their basics were all done in kumidachi, fighting stance, you know, and kata, they'd only go so far, and then the instructor, how do you do penny and yon? So I would step up and show them, because their fighting in the class was more all
took
fighting
precedent.
technique. Really interesting. And when the class had finished, they'd just stay behind and train, you know, on their own. And that. But that time there really taught me heaps about respect and never give up. You know, we had to go for a run around the street, and then if Senpai had driven past, we had to run to the gutter as he drove past in the car, then carry on, you know, like.
And how long did you train there for? Like, again,
6 weeks. 6 weeks.
Okay, so when you've left your family as such, your young family, and then you went to the Worlds, and then after the Worlds you stayed on for that extra month. And a bit.
Yeah. And my daughter always reminds me that I was never there for her second birthday and first birthday, and I said, "You can't remember that."
Oh, that's tough. Hey, that's great, Shihan. Thank you for sharing that, because, you know, I always mention when people have that opportunity to train in Japan, more so as an Uchi Deschi, is what they obviously got out of it, which you've just shared, but then what they brought back. And then brought back meaning, you know, were you, after a world tournament, you're Australian champion, you world tournament, you've done Uchi Deschi, and learned from one of the best ever in the game in that time. And what was your then thought, you know, am I going to be, were you just hungry for more? How are you explaining it how are you explaining this scenario to many others that will not be able to comprehend what you've just been through?
You know, I must say I've been very privileged to have met Kaneko, and
of course,
and had it been for him, I probably maybe not have got where I am now and what I've done. But the decision then was, because our daughter was about to turn 3, that we decided to come back to New Zealand. So we picked up and come home. But that year, 1988, we come home, and that was the year of the Commonwealth tournament at Sydney. Yes. So New Zealand, interesting, New Zealand had a team in there. So New Zealand wanted me in the team. They sent my entry form over, and Shihan Taylor turned my entry form down, said I couldn't compete because I was the Australian champion.
Right.
You know, and that was pretty disappointing for me, you know, because that was my chance to represent New Zealand as well, because I am a Kiwi, you know, and all that. But it just made me, so the Shihan Rob Bigby, he was organising that in New Zealand. Then the opportunity when they come back and said, well, will you run some coaching seminars for us here in New Zealand, weekend seminars? And I said, yeah, sure thing, you know, and then started going around New Zealand doing these seminars. So bringing what I had learned back to New Zealand and seeing things, and I remember the very first one thinking, hell, no wonder these guys don't win anything at the moment, because they don't train. They don't know how to train out. You know, that they were, their feet were raw. They were absolutely naked, and I didn't start too hard, and they were going, who's this bloody Aussie coming over here telling us what to do? I'm not an Aussie, but you talk like an Aussie. And that's how I got into becoming the New Zealand coach. So I took 2 New Zealand teams to the 5th and 6th World Tournaments.
Righto.
A team to Singapore for the Oyama Cup. They held the Oyama Cup in Singapore, and I was fortunate enough to train a couple of good fighters like Richard Hood, and we made that. Richard Hood made the South Pacific team, and we had that team tournament in Paris.
Yes.
And that's another story I can tell. I just went through my photo album the other day. I see a photo there because warming the boys up, and Judd Reed's there. And he's just a skinny little fella compared to what he looks like now, you know.
Sure.
I was holding the big mitt, and we were warming the boys up for that tournament. I think to see him now, or see what he's achieved from back then, things like that, you know, like stories. Amazing, you know, to have been part of their coming through to where they've got now, you know.
Very good. So there you go. So you get back to NZ, and now you're the coach, and you're instilling, like you just said, who's this lad or what's going on. But then, you know, what rank were you become or at that stage? And I say that because were you then slowly adjusting your game, or your it's not a career, but your journey was leading towards, you know, that coaching, instructing aside, your fighting career had tapered off, and you had done that adjustment well, or were you still in a bit of a well, bugger this, I
Oh,
want to compete. And
you still love to fight.
yeah.
You know, in '87 at the World Tournament, I was 33, and
Okay.
in your 30s now, I find that 30 and onwards up to around 39, well, you're in your prime, mentally and physically. You think you're tough at 20, 25, 30,
Yes.
but
Yes.
you don't really mature or mentally tough and physically tough early 30s. So I didn't have the time to train to fight after
Yep.
I got turned down, and then so I concentrated on the coaching side of it
Yes.
and building that up and bringing my knowledge back to these guys in New Zealand and to my students. I had some good fighters come through my dojo, but we had some talented fighters in New Zealand. They just didn't know how to train properly. Like Steve Takiwa, you know, he's a legend. Yeah, great fighter, got through. So working with him, he had his own boxing coach as well. But just Craig Fay, guys like this, Craig Fay, you know, he was got one of the quickest knocked out at the at a tournament we went to in the Sydney Opera House one year. But so that took over what I was doing. But I was still training hard and focusing on myself to get to that level and learn more and kata and then grade to Nidan and Sandan and go through there. But I just loved the coaching side of it and seeing the young people come through and develop and mature and blossom like that. And took a lot of my learnings back. And I was fortunate enough because I worked with or had a relationship with one of the head strength and conditioning coaches in Wanganui at the time who became for the Hurricanes. So he'd come with all these training ideas, how to improve your speed and fast twitch fiber and all that. And it's funny because a lot of what he was showing me, and with the technical terminology, I'd done in Japan as a Uchi Deschi in training, but they never said like this is plyometric training or ballistic stuff or the Tabata system. You know, way back then we were doing the Tabata system, bring it over here and introduced it into rugby, and they go, "What the hell's this?" You know, and the monkey crawl, the bear crawl, the crab crawl, all those primal animal movements that are good for martial artists to bring back, you know. So it was really interesting that what I'd learnt there, it didn't really know how valuable it was till a bit later on when you start coaching yourself, you know.
Yeah, well, that's great because, you know, the years go and the knowledge builds, and then the students come and go, obviously, you know, and now you're running, obviously you're at a dojo operator angle now, and then there's fighters that succeed, and then from that people want to be like them or are now familiar with you and your students winning New Zealand titles and so on. And then, you know, my angle now is when you know, you started, well, when I started fighting in the opens in 06, 07, around there, and then I was competing against, and I got to compete against Richard Hood in 07 in Sydney. And he became the first guy for me that everyone was saying, oh, you've got him in the semi-final, he's a this, he's a that, and he's, you know, and it very, you know, all the above, all the achievements. And I was honored. Like, I didn't feel the other way. I didn't, you know, how some, like you said, mentally I'm beaten. I was like, I can't wait to feel and see, you know, how his teacher teaches him, why they're doing well, because then that's going to help me. So I love that experience, and I had that, and you were on the sidelines for him there. Then I got him again in 08 in the semi-final, which we've brought up in the past. And, you know, again, that was my side of what you had brought up, where you had said, I'm not going to lose to him. I've got to do whatever I can here to make sure I can get this over the line, which, without me beating Richard in 08, I moved into the final to win it. And had I not have beaten him, you know, who knows? So it's a fascinating world.
Interesting, eh? Yeah. And it's It's interesting that how they're all different as a coach. And I think as a good instructor, you've got to understand your student. Nowadays, there is no secret technique or secret training method. Everything's available online and you can do whatever. So it's about working with your student to get him in his best possible mental and physical state, because it's like with no secret technique or training method, everyone can do the same thing. So it's about how to do as a coach or an instructor, develop your student. And like it's finding out, like with Big Pete, how to get him turned on prior to the match and do this. So understanding what he needs as a coach or an instructor to develop them to be able to perform at their best and their maximum when needed. You know, and that's the difference now, I think, for us as instructors, when you're coaching your students, is you've got to learn to understand how they work. And that was a difficult one with me with Richard Hood, because how did he work? I still don't know. But
I'll get him on and I'll get him to answer that after, and then we'll play it for you.
Well, it's a funny thing, because when I first opened my dojo back in Wanganui, when we went back, and there was Taekwondo, Zendu Kai was really big and all that, and Richard had done Taekwondo, and they heard about this guy, this Kyokushin dojo, and I'd have sparring once a week, and I would spar everyone till people learn, because I didn't want anyone getting hurt and thinking, oh, this is thuggery. Then one day, Richard Hood walks in the dojo, does the thing, we get sparring, you know, and he thinks he's the bee's knees. So you try to tell them physically, no, they won't listen mentally. So you've got to give them a little bit of a tickle up, hang him around. He never come back. About 6 months later, we'd shifted from a dojo to a new place. And Richard's walking past and he hears this Kiai and Osin and all that. And he walks in, and because I had a big moustache back in those days, and he goes, oh shit, there's that guy with the moustache again. But he come in and he never left from then, you know. So little stories like that, how people react differently to different things. It's interesting, you know, how you have to teach somebody something. They all learn in different ways.
Well, in learning in different ways, you mentioned another high profile student you've had, who I've had on the podcast, which is Sensei Pete Parson. And, you know, the conversation I want to have here is, you know, the lad is, I guess the angle I want to put it is the success that he continued to have in Australia, in New Zealand, and how you as a coach and as his sensei Shihan, you know, during that time, you know, because I was sharing it with him, Shihan, where I'm always fascinated in being a better student. I've got a great coach in Shihan Billy, but I would always I just have a knack of viewing and seeing things. And again, it's from my basketball days of, we had to scout. I had to know if he had a good left hand. I had to know if he had a good shot. Did he pull up on the drive? Did he dribble left? You had to just know so much of your opponent, or so much. And then you would watch other teams and clubs and players. With Pete and yourself, you guys were always after me, because I was in the middleweight, and it would get to quarterfinal, semi-final, and luckily, you know, would succeed to that point. But I would see how you guys, what you guys were doing, not to interfere with my angle. I was just like, shit. And Pete would always have his headphones on. And you would always kind of have a chat, and to an extent. And Shihan Billy would come up to me the more I progressed, with him going, you know what you have to do. He just had to word certain things to me, and then I would switch. Where you guys had a thing as well that I loved. I loved seeing it, because I was like, Jesus, you know, because some of our guys competed against you guys in the finals as well. How did you as a coach, more so, and I say coach in the language of the sports side, of the kumite side, just continue to make him succeed? Were you guys building, you know, when we were in Japan one time and he got to a real, you know, to an end point where we thought, shit, there is a chance here, you know, and, you guys had real good strategy, good planning, you know, for Pete as such and your other fighters, but for Pete so much. What was your, I guess, angle in the success of what had occurred there?
Yeah, well, Pete, he's a different person. Pete's very, very mentally tough.
Okay.
Right from the start. Physically and coordination in that to start with was something we had to work on, you know. He's a big boy, 6'5" and whatever, and him and his brother came, and his two sisters have trained as well.
Sure.
And his brother's even bigger, Simon, but Pete was the one that stuck in. So with Pete, it was just about learning about slow progression with him and teaching not to try and, I could see that he couldn't do certain things. Let's find out what he could do, which was his knee, of course. Yeah, he bloody knocked people out with that knee. And how do we set that up for him and do that? And then over the years, we worked on all different strategies as fitness-wise and all that. But Pete's a guy that I learned outside of the dojo. He will go and do things that no one would think of doing without doing seriously training for it, like go on a hike that lasted 72 hours up a mountain, down through a stream and all that. And he did it because a friend asked him to go with him. Didn't train for it, but he never gave up and do it. And that's, Pete was always like to be a winner. And then it was just working with him on how do we get him into that zone before the tournaments. And our big thing wasn't to worry too much about who he was fighting, but how what he needed to do and how he needed to block and counter and set himself up for those knees and do things. Because I knew mentally he didn't need any coaching mentally, he needed it physically, whereas some other people have got the technique and everything, but they haven't got the mental toughness. Pete had that mental toughness, so we work on everything else, and it just slowly built up his confidence, got stronger and stronger, and the will to win was always there. But we had that relationship. He's a hard worker. Like we'd have a training camp in our dojo, sleep in and do all that for fighters, and it's a Friday night, leave Sunday. He'd do all the training, all that, and then at about midnight on Saturday night, because their business is in town, he'd shoot off, go and work for 5 hours and come back and then be ready for a 6 o'clock session on the Sunday morning, you know. Things like that, you knew this guy's got what it takes to do it. So it's just about working on those things, you know, and yeah, he's been unlucky at a couple of things. That one in Japan, and I even think that one in Australia before against
Takuma,
the final Takuma. Yeah, mate. I don't know. I've looked at that video a few times.
Fair enough.
Yeah, but we won't go there. No.
Fair enough.
Because Katuma, when we went in 2016 to the Kyokushin, Katuma said to him, he come up to us and said, "Oh no, are you here, Pete? This could be our chance to fight again." He thought Pete might get right through to that.
To the end point. Yeah. Well, there you have it. No, that's good. Thank you for sharing that, because it was an insight that I was intrigued by, you know, and I think for others as well, for other, I guess, instructors and fighters that are listening to this, you know, what a good angle Shihan just put there, again, with his profession in understanding just some little key nuggets there that I definitely have taken on. Hey, Shihan, what's the side here that, you know, influences you from a mentor level from your superiors in New Zealand, you know, the influence of, you know, can you name a couple and how they've supported you in this journey up to now?
Yep. Look, we have in my dojo here in Wellington, I'm fortunate enough to have two of the oldest Kyokushin practitioners in New Zealand still training. Hanshi Doug Holloway, who brought Kyokushin back to New Zealand in 1965. He's the only one here that has trained for a whole year with Masoyama. He's had dinner at Masoyama's house. He was part of the family. He still trains at 75 and wears everybody out. Like, you know, the old school train, some of the techniques I cringe a bit that they might be the warm-up and stuff that's a bit old school, but he's just done it all his life and it's never stopped. And his we call it Death by Doug now. When we go to camps and it's his session, everyone, oh no, Death by Doug, because he just goes flat out, because that's how they train, 100 miles an hour, and he still does that today.
Wow.
He knows all his kata, and he's sharp and hard, and he'll do everything everyone else does or more. And some nights if I can't get there because of my rugby prior to COVID, and I'd say, oh, Hanshi Doug's going to take the class. Then only half of them would turn up because they knew it was going to be a bloody hell session, you know. So there's him, and there's a guy called Alex Terrace who's been around. He fought in the first full contact Kyokushin tournament here in 1967.
Wow.
As a 21-year-old. And he still trains and teaches in my dojo as well. When those two come together, Hanshi Doug and Shihan Alex, whoa, you know. I say to these young guys, you know, they're huffing and puffing. If these guys can do it, it's just inspirational, you know. So having guys like that, you know, and then there's Shihan Graham Gavigan from down south. He runs the South Island, I run the North Island in our organisation. He spent years, did his knee down under Steve Arneill and come back, and he was a lightweight fighter, tough as nails, fast as. He's got a big dojo in Dunedin now, you know, and he's another inspirational person. You just think, shit, you know, he actually had the same kidney problem Jonah Lomu had.
Oh wow!
Back in the day, so he was lightweight, around 70 kilos, only 5'8" or something. You know, and he had to take all these drugs and all that, steroids and stuff, and it blew him up a bit. You know, and now he's about 100 kilos. But mate, he's still fast as. And when you go to his sessions or camps, the South Island camp, he's another inspirational person. So there's people here in our organisation that have, you just look up to, you know,
sure,
because of what they've done and where they've been and how long they've survived, been in it, you know, for, you know, Hanshi Doug introduced the first full contact tournament in 1967, and we hold that 50-year Jubilee one here in 2017, where Shihan Jimmy brought young Nathan over. And there was another good fight final. Young Nathan and
Pete
Parson, you know, thinking, here's the old guy, here's the young bull coming through. Who's going to take over from him? Yeah, you know, things like that. Really interesting. But those two older guys, just sensational, you know. Yeah.
Well, that's great because again, I shared this with you earlier. You know, a lot of people hear their names, and more so me. You hear those great names and the influence that they've had on many. But for someone to share it like this, it's great for everyone to understand. You know how important and respected they are. Shihan, we've got about 10 more minutes or so, which has been an awesome chat so far. You know, it's flown through. What is, you know, my side angle here is. What now? Not now as in because of COVID, but what now? You know, what makes you continue to go back to the dojo? What makes you? I think I've got the answer. You know, you love coaching, but internally for you, you know.
Yeah, I'd be a grumpy old man if I didn't go and train in the dojo.
You've answered it. Done. Okay.
It's something. I remember one of my trips to Japan, going up to Hombu Dojo, and it was called the old person's class. I think you had to be over, I think they called it old 35 or 40. I can't remember what the age, but I just went up there to train, and they had a first cue who was 70 taking the class. And I just was a year over whatever the age was. I can't quite remember. but thinking then, looking at his technique and everything he did, apparently he'd been a first Q teaching up there for years, and he could do all this at 70 something. And I thought back then, if he can do that like this, then I want to be able to do that when I'm 75, and then coming home and seeing Hanshi Doug at this age. And that's something, it'll be like you'll see it's in your system. You'll never get rid of, you want to do karate all your life, and you'll feel lost when you can't, things now, as you get older, like little injuries come in, or from all those years of that hard contact training now, like your hips, little things start to go, and you can't do Jorama washes anymore, where they used to just come out of nowhere, and you can't do the splits anymore and stuff, but you can still punch and kick and train hard, and having that, entering the dojo, bowing down, ussing in, and we still do all the traditional stuff, no matter what everyone else does. We were taught by Maso Yama. We still teach Maso Yama way in MOK and Z. Bow in, shut your eyes, clear your mind, start training. Finish the same way. Open your mind about going home, facing the family, or doing what. But it's Zen training. You're in the zone that time. You walk into the dojo and start training. That's what I love about it.
Oh, that's great. Very cool, and it again, for listeners that get a moment there, the hearing Shihan Mike, like I said, and this is again the reason why the shuffle is my baby towards this platform, because I've met people. I'm very fortunate to meet people via my Shihan and build friendships and so on, and then I've at times, we only get to talk for 5-10 minutes at a tournament and also shake a hand, and then you just get on with business and so on. But Kyokushin has got so much has so much to offer, and you can just, having each of these episodes and talking to these great people, and the journeys and the highlights are so important to, and I mean, yours alone is just something that, again, we've squeezed into an hour, but it's so important, again, for what others need to be able, so some people may see you now from this and then go, hey, that was interesting. What a fascinating story. How good was, for my end, your training with Kaneko, I had no idea about. I've heard about him as well. And the guys in Melbourne had been taught by him as such, and the influence he had. But for you, what, with it, what a journey it was after meeting him.
Oh, yeah, and I must say I'm lucky I met his family, his mum and dad. He took me to his home where he grew up. His brother was a judo instructor, straight from college, did judo in there. It showed me around, and I think the best thing with him was I took him home to meet the wife, and my wife's a really good cook, and Kaneko could eat. Man, so we created that relationship. And one thing I'll never forget, we went and said to him, do you want ice cream? We were out somewhere in Manly, I think it was. And he got, the tubs they scoop the ice cream out of to put in the cone. He got the whole tub and ate the whole tub of ice cream. Not a word of a lie, and that's what he said, when your Uchi Deschi with the food would come out, and it was first in, first served to eat, and I think that helped with our relationship, that he'd come home and there's always heaps of food after our training for him to eat, because we lived 2 blocks from the dojo at the time, and that's why, knock on our door, train 5 years, we did this all the time, and I've got to say I was pretty lucky to have the support of him and Shihan out living,
Yeah, very good. Lastly, NZ, NZ Australia relationship. I've shared with you the importance, and I've again, I'm trying to do my best here to continue that keep that flame alive now that I'm off the mat, and the importance of your events as in you guys would come here no matter what, and without you guys and your students as such competing against me and so on, and Dane, we wouldn't have got better, we wouldn't have had that difference, and all the amazing stuff, and we've got to gesture that back. So I've trying to gesture back to you. I'm going to do my absolute best to get my students, you know, Shihan Billy and so forth, you know, with his travel and his work commitments. So my side of it has to lift. And, you know, for your side of it, you know, when there's things moving forward from this pandemic, you know, we have to get our butts down there. And I look forward to being on the opposite side to you, if you're still doing that. And that's what I'm alluding to, I guess. You know, you've got you're a higher rank. Congratulations on your 7th, Dan. And I doubt you're going to be on the other side of the mat. I think it's now Pete Parsons against Pat Pinto as such with our students.
Yeah. No, Pete's tuning into a good coach. We just had our first seminar with Big Pete about 3 weeks ago down in Dunedin.
Great.
And so he sat down with me and we got a plan. He was a bit nervous, but once he got on the mat and got started, so his stepping into his coaching side of things and stuff, and the stuff he brought to them, the guys, all the students were blown away. He did such an awesome job. So yes, and you're doing the same with yours. And yes, we'll keep that relationship. Because I did 8 or 9 years training in Australia and with Shihan Jimmy, our relationship from where we come from, our interaction is always will be part of something we don't want to lose, keeping that together. So all our fighters coming through, we've always talked about when there's something on in Australia, we'll go there and vice versa. So, you know, and like you say, it's the same for us as for you, for Big Pete and them. If we didn't have you guys to compete against, you're just fighting your same people at home. It's not the same. It's not like in our day, you'd go to like the Australian Open back then, you'd have 70 competitors in the middleweight, 70 in the lightweight, 30 in the heavyweight, and you got to compete against 5 or 6 different people at a tournament. Unfortunately, due to the split, the numbers are different. And that's why it's important to be able to travel around and train with other people and compete against each other, I think, you know, for the development of all our students.
100%. 100%. Well, Shihan, thank you so much. You know, it's been an honor, and I hit you up a while ago, and we've finally had our chance, and I appreciate your time.
You're doing an excellent job. Keep it up, and good luck with with your future. And I hope all these things you've started come to fruition, like that your idea of putting all those little bits up there for people to learn off sounds really good. So look forward to seeing some of that in the future as well.
Thank you, Shihan. Well done to you, and continue on your journey. And I look forward to staying in touch and obviously landing in NZ soil with a couple of fighters ready to go. So thank you so much for your time once again. Big us.
Look forward to it. Thank you, Patrick. Cheers.
I know you do. Shihan.